Hello, friend. Welcome to Science for Sleep. A bird's egg may seem solid, smooth, still, but each shell hides a quiet detail. More than 7,000 microscopic pores, invisible to the eye, stretch across the surface, letting air flow in and out while the growing life inside remains untouched. A breathing shell, a sealed container that inhales. Some nights, it helps to return to something like that. Something steady, familiar, self-contained, something like the shape of an egg. Not just what it holds, but what it is. You may be used to seeing eggs in the kitchen, in a carton, on a plate. But before they were part of meals, eggs were part of life. They still are. And long before any nest was built by birds, there were eggs. Sheltered in water, settled in sand, hidden in leaves, drifting through the ocean, pressed into tree bark, balanced in burrows and buried in soil. The egg is not a single thing. It is a way of beginning, a method life has used again and again. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, you're welcome to subscribe. And if it feels natural, to leave a comment sharing where you're listening from tonight. It helps others find their way to this calm corner of the world, one sleepy traveler at a time. The quiet continues here, just as it is. When a single cell begins to divide and a new life takes form, the egg is the first shelter. Inside it, everything is arranged. Water, proteins, fats, a little oxygen, a little calcium, and space, enough to grow from a cluster of cells to something with eyes, limbs, lungs, and heartbeat. The egg holds all of that, softly. Some are soft and transparent. Others are hard and speckled. Some shimmer green or blue or brown. Some float, some stick, some fall. But all are meant to contain something in between what is forming and what waits outside. Bird eggs are familiar to us, but fish lay eggs too. So do insects, and frogs, and turtles and snakes. Even some mammals, like the platypus, still lay eggs. The type of egg most land animals use is called a cleidoic egg. It's sealed with layers. It has a membrane to hold liquid, a shell to keep the outside out, a yolk to fuel growth, a white to cushion, and a few pores. Just enough to let in air and let out breath. It is self-contained. It can rest beneath a parent or under the sun, holding warmth as cells become tissue, and tissue becomes form. Long before animals walked the land, eggs began in water, laid in strands or clusters left to drift or settle. But those early eggs needed moisture around them. They would dry out on land. Over time, shells changed that. They let the egg carry its own water inside. That changed everything. Now the egg could travel. It could be placed in high places or deep ones, on cliffs, in trees, underground, under wings. Even in animals that don't lay eggs, like humans, the beginning is still the same. A single cell, wrapped and protected, developing in quiet, supported by nutrients, membranes, warmth, and time. The same principles, just rearranged. To be an egg is to hold possibility, to carry life, not yet exposed to the outside. It is a beginning held still, protected from what comes too soon, and nourished just enough. Tonight, we begin with that quiet shape, a curve, shell, a small sealed space where life takes its first steps. The shape remains, curved, still, and certain. Something about its surface feels settled, even when we know what waits inside. Growth, division, change. But not yet. For now, just quiet. There's something comforting about knowing that life begins tucked away. Not rushed, not exposed. Inside a space made just for becoming. Most of what we see in the world begins this way. Not in the open, but inside. Hidden for a time. Surrounded by structure. Supported by something else. That beginning, inside an egg, is not only gentle, it's strategic. It's how life protects its most delicate work. To begin life outside the body means that something else must carry the risk. The wind, the heat, the cold, the waiting. The egg becomes a middle ground. Not quite the parent, not quite the world. Just enough of both to allow something new to take form. Different animals make different choices about how to begin. Some, like fish or frogs, release eggs into water by the hundreds or thousands. These eggs are soft, often transparent, and filled with just enough yolk to sustain early development. Most will never hatch, but a few will, and that, in nature's terms, is enough. Others take a different approach. Reptiles, birds, some insects. They lay eggs that can survive on land. These are often tougher, encased in shells or leathery membranes. They don't need to be in water because they bring their own moisture inside. The embryo floats in fluid, shielded from drying winds or shifting temperatures. These eggs contain more nourishment too, more yolk, more structure, more time. And then there are those who do not lay eggs at all. Mammals, some snakes, some sharks. In these animals, development happens inside the body. The embryo is still enclosed, still protected, still supported. But the container is internal. The shell is gone, but the idea remains. Even in humans, life begins in a kind of egg. A fertilized cell, wrapped in membranes filled with fluid. The amnion surrounds it. The chorion breathes for it. The body feeds it from within. And when the time is right, it leaves the quiet of its first home and enters the noise of the world. None of these strategies are perfect. All involve trade-offs. Laying eggs allows a parent to move freely, to escape danger, to reproduce again. But it leaves the young vulnerable. Carrying the young inside offers protection, but it limits mobility and demands more energy from the parent. Every species balances these costs in its own way. Among land animals, one of the most important innovations is the amniotic egg. It contains not just one membrane, but several. One holds the fluid that cushions the embryo. Another exchanges gases with the air outside. A third stores waste, keeping the growing body clean. Together, they make the egg a complete system, almost like a miniature world, sealed and self-sustaining. This kind of egg made it possible for vertebrates to fully live on land. Amphibians still depend on water for their eggs. But reptiles and birds, and later mammals, brought the egg with them, evolving its structure to fit the dryness of the air. The egg didn't disappear. It simply moved inward in some lineages, wrapping itself in new forms. No matter the shape or placement, the egg provides something essential: time. It allows life to slow down, to follow a rhythm set by temperature, chemistry, and gentle growth. Inside the egg, organs form in silence. Limbs stretch, eyes darken, skin folds and thickens. Nothing hurries, nothing is skipped. Warmth matters too. Most eggs can only develop within a narrow temperature range. Too cold, and development stops. Too hot, and the delicate balance unravels. Some species use body heat to keep their eggs warm. Others rely on sunlit rocks, rotting leaves, or the gentle press of soil. Every warmth is a kind of promise, a sign that life is allowed to begin. To begin inside an egg is to be given that promise, a space, a moment, a pause before exposure. The egg does not guarantee survival, but it gives a chance. And sometimes a chance is enough. The outside world waits. But for now, there is only this: a boundary, a breath, a place to begin, where the smallest movements are allowed to unfold unseen. And within that quiet, something new is forming, slowly, gently, as it always has. It's easy to think of the egg as something finished, a design perfected long ago, now resting in nests and kitchens and memory. But the egg, like everything alive, has a history, and its shape today was not always this way. Before there were feathers or beaks, before there were wings or warm-blooded hearts, there were eggs. But not the kind that could rest on land. Not yet. The earliest eggs belonged to creatures in water. Small, translucent spheres released into streams, ponds, oceans. They drifted or sank or clung to surfaces. They needed the water to survive, because without it, they would dry out and collapse. These early eggs were soft, jelly-like, unguarded. Fish and amphibians still lay eggs like these. They release them in great numbers, thousands at a time, not because each one is strong, but because most will not survive. The egg, in this form, is a beginning by chance, a seed released into the current, and for millions of years, that was enough. But then, slowly, life began to explore the land. Not just for a moment, not just at the edge of the shore, but fully. To walk, to dig, to stay. And water was no longer everywhere. It was something that had to be carried or remembered. The old eggs could not follow. They were too fragile, too open, too thirsty for the air. So the egg changed. It did not become something entirely new, but something more complete. A system within a shell. Layers of protection, layers of separation. The cleidoic egg. Inside this egg, the embryo floated in its own fluid, no longer needing a pond or a stream. Gases passed in and out through tiny pores. Waste moved to its own compartment. And the shell, strong but thin, kept everything together, letting nothing escape too soon. This kind of egg no longer depended on the environment. It brought its own. Reptiles were the first to use it. The earliest ones laid leathery eggs, flexible but sealed. Over time, harder shells evolved, especially in drier climates, where water loss was a greater threat. These new eggs could be buried in warm sand, hidden beneath rocks, or left in shallow nests, relying on sun or soil for warmth. This change, from water-bound to self-contained, was more than a shift in structure. It was a turning point in life's ability to spread. It allowed animals to settle far from rivers and lakes, to climb mountains, to cross deserts, to nest in trees or cliffs or caves. Because wherever a parent could go, the egg could follow. The cleidoic egg carried with it 3 membranes: the amnion, which wrapped the embryo in fluid, the chorion, which allowed gases to pass, and the allantois, which held waste and sometimes helped with breathing. These parts are still found today, not just in bird eggs, but in humans too, inside the womb. They are part of the same story. As evolution continued, some creatures took the next step. They stopped laying eggs at all. The membrane stayed, but the shell disappeared. Mammals evolved to carry their young within the body, feeding them through a placenta rather than a yolk. But inside, the logic of the egg remained: a safe enclosure, a fluid world, a time set aside for building. Even today, one small group of mammals still lays eggs. The monotremes, animals like the platypus and echidna, remind us that the change wasn't sudden. It happened in pieces, in parallel, and the path forward wasn't the same for everyone. So the egg is not just a structure that works. It's a story about adaptation, about leaving water without leaving life behind, about keeping the most fragile moment of growth close, protected, and portable. You can picture them, resting in the soft light of evolution. Clusters of leathery eggs in warm sand, a curled reptile nearby. Above them, the changing sky. Below, the steady heat of the earth. Around them, the long stretch of time, carrying forward a quiet solution to the same old question. How does life begin? With something that holds, something that gives, something that changes just enough to last. What's inside an egg is not chaos. It's order, wrapped in softness. By the time it's laid, or formed, or settled, the egg is already arranged, not just as a container, but as a system. Not just one part, but many, each with a role to play. From the outside, it may seem simple. A shell, a yolk, a white. But each part of an egg exists for a reason, shaped by a long memory of what works. Layer by layer, the egg balances strength, nourishment, hydration, and breath. It is not a hollow shape. It is a full design. Start with the shell. You've likely held one in your hand, or heard the sound it makes when it cracks. It feels delicate, but it's not weak. Made mostly of calcium carbonate, the shell forms a thin curved shield around everything inside. It protects against pressure and shock, but it also breathes. Tiny pores, thousands of them, run through the shell, invisible to the eye. They let oxygen move in and carbon dioxide move out, allowing the embryo to breathe without breaking the seal. Beneath the shell are 2 membranes, one pressed just beneath the surface and one clinging closer to the contents. These membranes form a second line of defense. They keep bacteria out and hold moisture in. They also create the air cell, a small pocket of gas that forms at the blunt end of the egg. As the egg ages, the air cell grows, slowly expanding as moisture evaporates through the shell. Then there is the albumin, the egg white. Clear at first, it turns opaque when heated, but within the shell it is transparent, thick, and protective. It cushions the yolk and embryo. It holds water, proteins, and trace minerals. Its texture changes with age, firm when fresh, thinner over time. In a developing egg, the albumin serves as both shock absorber and hydration source. Its proteins also help prevent microbial growth, keeping the interior clean. Suspended at the center is the yolk. It holds most of the egg's nutrients. Fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals. The yolk is energy, stored and waiting, meant to feed the embryo as it forms cells, tissues, organs. It floats inside the albumin, anchored in place by two coiled threads, the chelazae. These pale, twisted strands are often mistaken for imperfections, but they are supports. They hold the yolk in place, keeping it centered as the egg is moved or turned. At the very top of the yolk is a small disc, the germinal disc, or blaster disc. This is where development begins if the egg is fertilized. Just a few millimeters wide, it is the starting point of new life. If the egg is not fertilized, the disc remains unchanged. If it is, the cells there divide and organize layer by layer, slowly building a body. Each part has its own balance. The shell must be hard enough to protect, but thin enough to break when the time comes. The membranes must be tight enough to guard, but flexible enough to allow movement. The albumin must be thick enough to support, but light enough to shift. The yolk must contain just enough to last, but not so much that it oversupplies. Every detail is measured. In some species, the proportions change. Birds that fly long distances often lay eggs with stronger shells. Ground nesting birds may have thicker chelazae to hold the yolk in place more securely. Some reptiles produce eggs with leathery shells and different membrane compositions. The layout remains, but the details adapt. The anatomy of the egg is not random. It's the result of time, long, slow time, shaping the safest way to begin. What looks like a single object is really a system of layers, a structure for growth, a microenvironment that holds life in place, while giving it room to become. You can picture it now, whole and still, resting in a nest. The light catches the curve of the shell. Inside, the albumin shifts slightly as warmth begins to rise. The yolk hovers quietly at center, held by threads. And deep in its surface, a single circle of cells begins to stir, untouched, unseen, and fully supported. This is the egg, from the inside out. Not a mystery, but a memory of all the lives that came before and all the ones still waiting to begin. Even before the first heartbeat, the egg is guarded, not by a parent, not by a nest, but by a shell, curved, silent, and still. A structure made to hold life in and keep danger out. It is the first boundary, the first wall, the first home. And yet, it does not seal the egg away completely. It allows what must pass through to pass. It breathes just enough. It gives just enough. It protects without locking the world out entirely. This is the nature of the shell. Its outer surface, smooth to the touch, is made almost entirely of calcium carbonate, the same compound found in limestone and coral. But the shell is not rock. It is crystal and protein woven together, light, strong, and strangely porous. If you were to magnify a section of it, you would find thousands of tiny holes, pores, just wide enough for molecules of gas to move through. Each shell has between 7,000 and 17,000 of them, depending on the species and size. These pores allow oxygen to enter and carbon dioxide to leave. Even before lungs have formed, the embryo needs to breathe, and the shell makes this possible. But it must do so without losing too much moisture. Too much evaporation, and the developing body will dry out. Too little exchange, and it will suffocate. So the shell is not sealed. But it is selective. Its pores are protected by a thin outer layer called the cuticle or bloom, an invisible coating that helps prevent bacteria and dirt from slipping inside. In many places, farm-fresh eggs are left unwashed to preserve this natural barrier. Once washed away, the egg becomes more vulnerable and more dependent on refrigeration. Beneath the surface, the shell's strength lies in its shape. The curve of an egg distributes pressure evenly. That's why it can be surprisingly hard to crush an egg when it's held lengthwise in your palm. The force spreads along the arc, resisting collapse. Birds and reptiles have taken advantage of this, laying eggs that are strong enough to endure weight and movement, but thin enough to crack when the time is right. The embryo plays a role in that too. Near the end of development, the growing chick or hatchling begins to press against the inside of the shell. A small, pointed structure called the egg tooth, a temporary part of the beak or snout, helps pierce the inner membrane. Once the air cell is breached, the young animal takes its first breath. Then slowly, it begins to chip its way out, using repeated movements to create a circle of weakness. Eventually, the shell breaks open. This process is called pipping. It is deliberate and gradual, a kind of soft emergence. The same structure that once kept the embryo safe now opens just enough to let it leave. Not by accident, but by design. Shell thickness varies. Quail eggs are paper thin. Emu eggs are thick and dense. The thickness depends on species, size, and habitat. Ground-nesting birds tend to lay eggs with stronger shells to guard against trampling or predators. Tree-nesting species may lean toward thinner shells, saving weight and energy. Calcium for shell formation comes from the mother. In birds, the shell is added last, after the egg has passed through earlier reproductive stages. The calcium is pulled from diet and even bone stores. This is one reason why birds need diets rich in calcium during the breeding season. Each shell is a significant investment. Once laid, the shell becomes part of the environment. It absorbs ambient warmth or coolness. It may reflect light or blend into shadows, depending on its color and texture. Some are speckled, others are plain. Some are nearly invisible against soil or leaves. Some shimmer faintly in blue or green or cream. Every shell is a compromise between visibility and camouflage, strength and weight, openness and closure. It is easy to think of the shell as armor, but it is more than that. It is a breathing wall, a curved filter, a promise of safety, but not permanence. You can imagine it now, resting in stillness, the outer world brushing past, light and shadow shifting over its surface. Inside, warmth gathers, cells divide, a heartbeat begins, and the shell, unmoving, continues to do its work, guarding the small world within until the moment it is ready to end. Not by failing, but by opening. The shell holds steady. Outside, the world remains unchanged. Light moving across leaves, air passing gently through feathers or sand. But inside the egg, everything is shifting. What begins as a single cell is already becoming more. Even in the earliest hours, change is underway. Not fast, not chaotic, just constant. A slow and ordered unfolding. It starts with a spark. Fertilization. One cell, now complete, begins to divide. Once. Twice. Then again. Each division smaller than the last, but no less exact. This is cleavage, a quiet name for a rapid process. From 1 cell to 2 to 4 to 8. By the time the shell has cooled from the warmth of the body, the embryo is already taking shape. No new mass is added yet. The cells simply rearrange using what's already there, and they begin to organize. Some move inward, some shift to the edge. A gentle layering begins. Soon, the layers begin to specialize. 3 in total. One becomes the skin and nervous system. Another becomes muscle, bone, and heart. The third becomes the lining of the gut, the lungs, the organs that take in and transform. These are the germ layers, the scaffolding of a body. From these, systems begin to emerge. The first to form is the nervous system. A narrow groove appears. It folds, deepens, closes. The beginnings of a brain and spinal cord. Eyes begin as simple pits. Nerves stretch outward, as if reaching for limbs not yet formed. The body curves, the head rounds, the back arches in silence. The heart comes next, a simple tube that begins to pulse, even before it's fully built. The blood it pushes doesn't go far at first, but it moves, circulating, nourishing, carrying warmth where it's needed. In time, vessels stretch outward, connecting to yolk and membrane. All the while, the embryo is drawing from the yolk. Thick and golden, it holds the energy of everything that came before. Nutrients passed down, stored for this moment. The embryo does not eat. It absorbs, slowly, consistently. Each cell using what it needs to grow into something more. Days pass. The body straightens. Limbs begin to bud. Wings or legs or fins depending on the species. Toes divide from pads. Beaks form, or jaws, or snouts. Each species follows its own pattern, but the stages rhyme. Growth is not random. It follows a deep, invisible script. Inside the shell, everything darkens. The bones firm. The eyes deepen in color. The skin begins to show its texture. Feathers in one species, scales in another. The organs find their place. The lungs begin to form folds. The mouth opens, sometimes without sound. In the final days, movement begins. Small shifts at first, a tilt, a stretch. Some embryos press gently against the shell. Some even make sound, faint peeps from inside, especially in birds. These early vocalizations may help coordinate hatching, especially in species that emerge in groups. All of this from a single cell, and all of it hidden. The albumin, once thick, begins to thin, its nutrients drawn inward. The yolk, once suspended, is pulled into the body. It will continue to nourish the hatchling for hours, sometimes days, after emergence. Nothing is wasted. Everything is used. The air cell at the blunt end of the egg grows. As the embryo breathes more, the balance of gases inside shifts. When the lungs are ready, the hatchling pierces the membrane separating it from the air cell. It takes its first breath, not from the open world, but from a pocket of air it has been building all along. Hatching doesn't happen all at once. It takes time. The egg tooth, a temporary structure, helps the young animal break through. A small crack, then another, a rhythm, a pause. The shell weakens, the boundary softens, but for now, all of that is still ahead. Inside the shell, the work continues, quiet, measured, exact. You can imagine it, just beneath the surface. Cells dividing, layers shifting, organs forming, the heartbeat rising, a body building itself, not in haste, but with patience, surrounded by warmth, held by layers, and fueled by everything it needs. Life still sealed, but no longer small. Some things cannot be rushed. The forming of bones, the folding of wings, the slow building of a heartbeat. These things take time. Not just days, but the right kind of days. Warm ones, still ones. Days that hold steady. Inside the egg, time is not measured by clocks. It is measured by heat. Not heat in bursts, but heat that stays. Heat that lingers close to the shell. Heat that knows not to change too quickly. For an egg, warmth is everything. The embryo needs it to divide, to stretch, to form. Too cold, and the cells slow. Too warm, and they lose their rhythm. Too much fluctuation, and the fragile instructions that guide development begin to falter. So the egg waits for steadiness, not perfection, but consistency. Each species has its own threshold. For a chicken, the magic number is around 99.5 degrees Fahrenheit, about 37.5 Celsius. A degree or two above or below for too long, and growth will pause or end. But within that narrow window, everything happens on schedule. The heart begins to beat around day 2. The beak forms by day 6. Feathers appear by day 10. The embryo turns within the shell as day 20 approaches. By day 21, it begins to hatch. Other species move slower. Some lizards may take 60 or 70 days. Some turtles longer. Crocodiles may take up to 90 days, depending on the temperature around the nest. And some reptiles in colder regions take months, even a full year, before the hatchlings emerge. Their bodies slow with the chill. They wait inside the shell for spring. In birds, warmth usually comes from a parent. One or both may sit on the eggs, pressing their bodies against the shell, adjusting their position to warm the clutch evenly. Some birds have a bare patch of skin called a brood patch, soft, featherless, and filled with blood vessels, to help transfer heat directly. They turn the eggs with care, rotating them gently each day to ensure even development. But not all species warm their eggs with their bodies. Some bury them in sand, letting sunlight do the work. Others lay them in composting vegetation, where the heat of decay acts as an incubator. In caves and hollows, geothermal warmth may provide just enough. These methods are less precise, but nature has made room for that too. In some reptiles, the temperature of the egg doesn't just shape the body, it shapes the identity. In turtles, crocodiles, and some lizards, the sex of the embryo is determined not by chromosomes alone, but by warmth. Slightly cooler nests may produce mostly males. Slightly warmer ones, mostly females. It depends on the species. This is called temperature-dependent sex determination. It's not uniform, but it works. Too much heat can be dangerous. In the wild, a sudden wave of high temperatures can stop development or cause deformities. In artificial settings, breeders use incubators to keep temperatures exact. Time to the hour, measured to the 10th of a degree. But in nature, precision is softer. The egg relies on patterns, seasons, shadows, soil. Some eggs are adapted to wait. They pause their development in response to coolness or dryness. This is called diapause, a natural delay that keeps the embryo from emerging into the world too soon. In insects, amphibians, and even some birds, diapause can stretch development across months, even seasons. The egg does not die. It waits, as if listening for the right time. Time, too, is part of the shell. Inside, the embryo is unaware of days. It does not know the length of morning or evening. It grows as warmth allows. It follows the patterns set by chemistry and need. And when the time is right, not too soon, not too late, the first breath is taken. The first movement begins. From the outside, incubation looks like stillness. But inside, it is full of motion. Not hurried motion, not loud, just layers forming, blood moving, bone stretching, organs awakening. All of it depending on the quiet work of warmth held close. You can picture it now, an egg resting in the soft bowl of a nest, or tucked beneath soil, or pressed between feathers. Around it, the world moves on. But inside, a different rhythm is kept. A rhythm of patience, of rising heat, of time passing slowly, shaping something small into something ready. The egg listens, not with ears, but with chemistry. It listens to the warmth, and the warmth answers again and again, until the answer becomes a body, and the body is ready to begin. The egg is a shape we recognize, but what lives inside that shape, and how it's made, placed, or protected, depends on who laid it. Across the animal kingdom, eggs come in countless forms. Some are large and patterned, some are soft and clear, some glow, some harden, some drift freely through oceans. Others are carefully hidden in nests, hollowed trees, or underground chambers. The egg is not a single design. It is a repeating solution, carried out in different ways, by different creatures, to meet the same need. Among birds, the eggs we know best are often the most visible. The chicken's egg, pale and smooth. But even here, there is variety. Hummingbird eggs are no larger than a jelly bean. Ostrich eggs are the largest laid today, over 5 inches across, weighing more than a dozen chicken eggs combined. Each one contains the same fundamental parts: a shell, a yolk, a white, and a beginning. But the proportions shift, shaped by size, diet, climate, and behavior. In reptiles, the shell tells a different story. Some species lay hard-shelled eggs, like birds. Others produce soft, leathery eggs that are flexible to the touch, more pouch than capsule. These are often buried in sand or soil, where moisture and temperature play a quiet but powerful role. Snakes and lizards leave their eggs hidden, unguarded, relying on placement rather than protection. But crocodiles stay close. They may carry their young to water once they hatch, gently holding the hatchlings in their jaws. Fish rarely lay eggs in nests. Their eggs are usually small, translucent spheres, released in large numbers into the water. Most float or sink, depending on their density. Some stick to surfaces, rocks, plants, coral. Others drift in schools, unanchored. Fertilization happens externally in many fish species. The female lays the eggs, and the male passes over them, releasing sperm into the water. These eggs must be numerous, because most will never hatch. But the few that do will continue the cycle. Amphibians, frogs, toads, salamanders, often return to water to lay their eggs, even if they spend much of their lives on land. Their eggs, too, are soft and gelatinous. Frog eggs may be laid in clusters that cling to reeds or float on ponds. Salamanders may lay single eggs tucked under leaves or stones. Some tropical frogs carry their eggs on their backs or legs. A few species lay eggs in trees using rainwater pooled in leaves to shelter their young. Insects offer the most extreme diversity. Some lay eggs singly, others lay hundreds at once. Some attach them to leaves, stems, or bark with tiny strands of silk. Some bury them underground or inside other animals. The praying mantis lays its eggs in a frothy mass that hardens into a protective case. Butterflies lay one egg at a time on a specific host plant, chosen carefully for what the caterpillar will need once it hatches. Ants and bees tend their eggs inside nests, feeding and guarding them. For these species, the egg is just the beginning of a social system. Even mollusks lay eggs. Snails and slugs lay clusters of soft, translucent pearls under logs or stones. Squid and octopuses lay strings or capsules of eggs that wave in the currents, hidden in caves or under ledges. Some octopus species guard their eggs for months, never leaving them, fanning them gently with water to keep them clean, touching them often. In these quiet caves, hundreds of eggs dangle in the dark, pulsing gently as life stirs inside. And then there are the monotremes, the rare mammals who still lay eggs. The platypus, with its soft bill and dense fur, lays leathery eggs in a burrow. The echidna, spiny and slow, carries its egg in a pouch until it hatches. These eggs are small, soft, and cling to a different time, a reminder of when mammals were closer to reptiles, and the line between warm-blooded and egg-laying had not yet fully split. In all these creatures, the egg reflects a balance between exposure and protection, energy and economy, care and release. Some species stay with their eggs, others leave them. Some build elaborate nests. Others offer only the warmth of soil or the weight of water. You can imagine them now, scattered across the planet, resting in nests, floating beneath lily pads, clinging to leaves in the canopy, buried in sand, curled in moss, pulsing in underwater caves. Thousands of forms, each one made for a different world, and inside each the same quiet purpose: to hold what is not yet ready, just long enough to begin. When you imagine an egg, you might picture something smooth and pale, oval, balanced. But across the natural world, eggs take many forms, some narrow, some nearly round, some covered in tiny speckles or deep pigments. They rest in colors that disappear into sand, bark, or shadow. Their shapes follow not just tradition, but purpose. The shape of an egg is not chosen, but inherited, refined by time and circumstance. Most bird eggs are oval or elliptical, wide at one end and tapered at the other. This shape makes them easier to nest together and harder to roll away. On narrow ledges or inside burrows, a rolling egg turns in a circle, staying close rather than wandering far. Some seabirds nest on high cliffs where space is limited. Their eggs are sharply pointed at one end, almost pear-shaped, so they spin in place rather than falling. In other birds, where rolling is less of a concern, the eggs may be rounder. Owls and woodpeckers, who nest in deep hollows or tree cavities, lay nearly spherical eggs. This shape helps retain heat more evenly, and the depth of the cavity prevents escape. Shorebirds and ground nesters may lean toward longer, tapered eggs that can be tightly packed together. Beyond shape, eggs also speak in color. Some are nearly white, others are pale green, soft blue, deep brown. Some shimmer faintly in shades of rose or cream. Some are speckled, a scattering of dots and freckles that seem random, but often follow patterns hidden to the eye. Each mark, each shade, holds quiet meaning. Color comes from pigments laid down in the final stages of shell formation. Two main pigments shape most of what we see. One is biliverdin, which gives eggs a bluish or greenish tint. The other is protoporphyrin, which produces browns and reds. Together, they blend into an entire palette. Some species lay vivid blue eggs. Others, a soft cocoa or rich rust. The patterns vary too, some with bold splotches, others with fine, almost invisible veining. These colors aren't just decoration. They serve a purpose. For many species, they help camouflage the egg, making it less visible to predators. A speckled egg in a gravel nest. A brown egg on dark soil. A pale green egg nestled among leaves. The egg does not vanish, but it blends just enough to go unnoticed. In some cases, colors also signal strength. Heavier pigmentation may reinforce thinner areas of shell. In certain species, brighter eggs may indicate a healthy, well-fed mother. In others, the coloring helps parents recognize their own eggs among many, as in the case of communal nesters or species vulnerable to brood parasitism. Brood parasitism is when one bird lays its eggs in the nest of another. Cuckoos are known for this. They lay their eggs in the nests of other species and leave them to be raised by unsuspecting hosts. Over time, host birds have evolved to spot eggs that don't belong, often by color or pattern. In response, parasitic birds have evolved eggs that mimic the originals, nearly matching them in size, shape, and shade. A quiet contest of mimicry and memory. Beyond birds, egg color and shape take new forms. Reptile eggs are often white or cream, with few markings. Their soft shells don't allow for as much pigmentation. Amphibian eggs are often transparent, especially in water. Their embryos visible through the jelly. Fish eggs may be clear, amber or pink. Insects lay eggs that are patterned more in texture than color. ribbed, spiked, ridged. Their beauty is hidden in smallness, in repetition, in structure that fits within the width of a needle. Each shape and color tells a story about where the egg is meant to be. A cliff, a burrow, a pond, a tree hollow, a grain of sand. The pattern is not always visible to us, but it matches something in the world around it. You can imagine them now, not just as objects, but as signals. Ovals tucked into nests. Long, tapered eggs turned toward sunlight. Speckled shells catching the dim green light of a canopy. Blue eggs held in woven grass. Almost white eggs resting in deep hollows. Each form a quiet reply to its surroundings. A reply written not in words, but in curves and color. The egg does not choose its markings, but they help it survive. What you see on the outside, the shade, the pattern, the shine, is a whisper from the world that shaped it, and a message to the world that waits outside. Not all eggs are equal. Some are barely visible. Others fill the palm. Some weigh almost nothing. Others are carried with effort. But each one, large or small, carries the full hope of a beginning. And behind every egg is a quiet calculation of energy, of risk, of time. Egg size is not only a matter of species or shape. It is a reflection of investment, of how much a parent can offer before birth, and how much they must leave to chance. Some animals give more up front, creating a single egg with all the nourishment a new life could need. Others give less but give often, producing dozens, hundreds, even thousands of eggs at once, each with only the essentials. It's a trade-off. A large egg requires more resources to make. More protein, more fat, more calcium, often more time. But it also provides more to the developing embryo. A deeper yolk, a more protected structure, a better chance to emerge strong and complete. These eggs are usually fewer in number. A clutch of 1 or 2 or 5. Each one counted, each one watched. Small eggs are simpler, easier to produce. They may be laid quickly, sometimes scattered across wide areas. Their numbers are their strategy. Many will be lost to predators, to weather, to chance. But some will survive. And in many ecosystems, that is enough. Not safety, not guarantee, just enough. Fish often follow this path. A single female may release thousands of eggs in a single season. Each is small, suspended in water, unguarded. Insects too rely on number. A moth may lay hundreds of eggs on a single plant. A mosquito may scatter dozens on the surface of still water. They do not stay. They do not feed. Their work is in the laying. Reptiles and birds tend toward a middle ground. Some lay 1 or 2 large eggs. Others produce clutches of a dozen or more. Ground nesting species often lay more eggs, balancing the risks of exposure with the effort of care. Tree nesting birds may lay fewer, placing their eggs in safer, more enclosed spaces. And then there is the kiwi. A small, flightless bird from New Zealand, the kiwi lays an egg unlike any other. In proportion to its body, it is the largest egg of any bird on Earth. It can weigh nearly a full fifth of the mother's body weight. Imagine a human giving birth to a baby the size of a 6-year-old child. The egg fills the kiwi's body so completely that in the final days before laying, the bird can barely move and often cannot eat. The egg is so large, it holds nearly twice the yolk of other birds' eggs, giving the hatchling enough nutrients to emerge fully feathered, already alert. This is an extreme example of what's called precocial development, where the young are born or hatched relatively mature, able to walk, feed, or flee soon after arrival. In contrast, altricial species, like songbirds, hatch blind, featherless, and helpless. They require time, warmth, and feeding before they're ready to live on their own. Precocial young come from larger eggs, with more yolk and more time spent developing inside. Altricial young come from smaller eggs and grow more outside the shell, relying on extended care. Again, it's a balance. One that reflects not just the egg, but the world around it. The predators nearby, the climate, the size of the parents, and their behaviors. In mammals, this balance shows up differently. The egg is internal, but the trade-off remains. Species with longer pregnancies often have fewer offspring, more developed at birth. Those with shorter gestation periods may give birth to litters, smaller, less mature, but more numerous. In all these cases, the egg is shaped not just by biology, but by energy. How much can be given? How much must be saved? Each egg carries a quiet record of the cost it took to make and the strategy behind its size. You can imagine them now, the large, heavy egg resting alone in a shaded nest, the tiny, translucent eggs scattered like mist over pondweed, the long row of buried reptile eggs, warm beneath the sand, each one different in scale, but each one chosen, not chosen by the individual, but chosen by time, by the conditions that shaped its ancestors, by what worked well enough to last. And in that shape, large or small, rich or spare, is the weight of a life not yet begun, and the quiet hope that it will one day break free. If you could look inside an egg, not with eyes alone, but with the patience of molecules, you would see more than color and shape. You would see arrangement, balance, tiny particles coming together to form something soft, strong, and sustaining. Because the egg is not just a shell with something inside. It is a chemical system, a reservoir of structure and energy, built for one purpose: to support life as it forms. Most of the egg, by volume, is water. Nearly 90% of the egg white, the albumin, is liquid, clear, viscous. It flows when cracked, but inside the shell, it holds its shape, suspended, lightly bound. The water carries proteins and minerals, each dissolved into place. This fluid doesn't just cushion the embryo, it hydrates it, and it moves, shifting gently when the egg is turned, distributing warmth and pressure, helping keep the inner world balanced. The primary protein in the white is ovalbumin. It makes up over half of the albumin's protein content. Other proteins float beside it: conalbumin, ovomucoid, lysozyme, each with a role. Some bind iron, some protect against bacteria, some contribute to viscosity, texture, or elasticity. Together, they make the albumin more than fluid. They make it functional. These proteins are sensitive to heat. When warmed, they unfold and reconnect, creating a network. That's why egg whites turn solid when cooked. It's why they can form foams when beaten, trapping air inside expanding bubbles. But inside the egg, these reactions are still waiting, held in reserve, quietly available to the growing life at the center. That center, the yolk, is smaller in volume, but richer in density. It holds the bulk of the egg's nutrients: fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals. Its golden color comes from carotenoids derived from what the mother ate. In wild birds, yolks can be pale yellow, deep orange, even pink. Not by design, but by diet. The yolk is layered. The innermost portion forms early. New layers are added gradually, in rings, each one wrapping the last. You can see these rings in a hard-boiled egg, a gentle gradient from deep yellow to pale gold. Each layer holds lipids, fats, that fuel embryonic growth. These include triglycerides for energy and phospholipids like lecithin, which help form cell membranes. Lecithin is also used by the body to build the brain and nervous system. For the embryo, it's foundational. The yolk also contains cholesterol, not as a threat, but as a tool. Cholesterol is needed to build hormones and stabilize cell membranes. In a growing body, it's essential. For human consumption, cholesterol is more complicated. But inside the egg, it's simply part of the plan. Both yolk and white contain all 9 essential amino acids, the building blocks of protein that animals cannot synthesize on their own. These amino acids are used to construct muscle, enzymes, blood cells, and more. The balance is remarkably complete. So much so that eggs are often used as a reference standard when evaluating the protein quality of other foods. Eggs also contain a range of vitamins, especially fat-soluble ones like A, D, E, and K, as well as B-complex vitamins such as B12, riboflavin, and folate. These contribute to everything from energy metabolism to neural development. Minerals, too, are present: iron, phosphorus, selenium, iodine. The exact composition varies slightly by species, diet, and environment, but the structure remains. It is a closed loop, a complete package, a careful layering of chemical elements into a single form. Even the membranes of the egg, thin and nearly invisible, contain proteins like collagen. These serve as both barriers and scaffolding, keeping the contents in place while allowing the movement of gases. The shell itself is mineral, but bound together by organic molecules that lend it just enough give to avoid shattering under light pressure. And water, often overlooked, is the medium that makes all of this possible. It dissolves, suspends, and transports. It keeps temperatures stable and reactions smooth. Without it, none of the nutrients could reach the growing embryo. With it, every part of the egg stays ready to nourish what is coming next. You can imagine it now, not just as shape and shell, but as a softly balanced collection of parts. A small chamber of elements: hydrogen and oxygen, carbon and calcium, protein coils curled in solution, fats layered like blankets, minerals waiting in quiet abundance. The egg, as chemistry, is no less remarkable than the egg as life. Its recipe is precise but flexible, timeless but responsive. A quiet library of ingredients, assembled without waste, held together by water and time. And all of it arranged to serve a single unfolding task: to turn what is potential into presence, one molecule at a time. The egg holds its shape, quiet, unmoving. But when the world interacts with it, with heat, with air, with motion, it changes. Not wildly, not abruptly, but with purpose. Its stillness is not resistance. It is readiness. The shell is the first sign. It looks fragile, and in many ways, it is. Tap it sharply from the side, and it cracks. But its shape gives it strength. The curve of an egg distributes pressure evenly, especially when pressed from top to bottom. That's why it can support surprising weight when squeezed lengthwise. The same arch used in bridges and domes exists here, scaled down, curved into silence. Inside, the yolk floats at the center. It doesn't drift freely. It stays near the middle, suspended in place by two pale cords, the chalazae. These twisted strands anchor the yolk gently, keeping it from pressing against the shell wall. The chalazae unwind slightly when the egg is turned, then slowly pull the yolk back into position. Even with movement, the balance returns. Part of this balance comes from density. The yolk is denser than the albumin around it, but not so heavy that it sinks. It floats, supported by viscosity. The albumin is thicker when the egg is fresh, thinning with time. This change affects not just texture, but protection. A thinner albumin is less effective at shielding the yolk from shock. Within the egg, membranes separate. The inner and outer membranes lie just beneath the shell. They provide another line of defense, flexible, strong, and capable of withstanding light impact. When the shell cracks, these membranes often hold the contents together, if only for a moment. But the most visible changes come with heat. When an egg is heated, in boiling water, a pan, or an oven, the proteins inside begin to denature. This means they unravel, losing the shapes they held in the raw state. These unfolded proteins then reconnect with one another, forming a new network. This is coagulation. It turns a liquid into a soft solid, transparent into opaque, shifting into still. The egg white responds first. At around 140 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 degrees Celsius, the albumin begins to firm. By 180 degrees Fahrenheit, 82 degrees Celsius, it is fully set. The yolk follows a different path. It begins to thicken at about 150 degrees Fahrenheit, 65 degrees Celsius, then becomes solid just below boiling. The yolk's higher fat content softens its structure, keeping it creamier even when firm. The way an egg behaves under heat is not just culinary. It's structural. It reflects the arrangement of proteins and water, and how those elements respond to time and temperature. This is why an overcooked egg turns rubbery. The proteins pull too tightly together, squeezing out water. What was once supple becomes stiff. The egg can also trap air. When egg whites are whipped, the proteins unfold and stretch around air bubbles. These bubbles multiply, creating a foam. If left to sit, the foam collapses. But if stabilized by sugar, by heat, it becomes something else. A meringue, a soufflé, a lifted structure made mostly of air and egg. This ability to change, to solidify, to hold air. It's rare. Few natural materials behave quite this way, and yet the egg does it all with only the parts it holds inside. You can test its properties with your hands. Spin a raw egg and a boiled egg side by side. The boiled one will spin quickly, neatly. The raw one wobbles. Its liquid interior resists movement, slowing the rotation. Or place an egg in water. A fresh egg sinks. An older egg tilts, then floats. Its air cell having grown larger over time as moisture escaped through the shell's pores. Even in the ways it moves, the egg reveals its state. It's a structure made to transform. Not just once, but in response to what it encounters. Temperature, pressure, motion, air. It reacts quietly, precisely, within narrow margins. You can imagine it now, resting in a warm hand. Still, whole, and yet filled with responses waiting to unfold. Heated, it thickens. Beaten, it foams. Turned, it recenters. It yields without collapsing. It holds without clinging. It changes, but only when asked. The egg is not just a container. It is a system in balance. And when the moment comes, it knows how to let go of one form and become another. To hold life inside a shell is to guard something precious and vulnerable. The egg is a promise, but it is also a target. A small body filled with nutrients lying still, unable to flee or fight. In every landscape where eggs are laid, something is watching. Something is listening. Something is waiting. And so the egg must protect itself, not by strength alone, but by strategy. Some eggs are hidden, buried beneath soil, tucked into moss, slipped beneath leaves or under stone. A snake may lay its clutch in the warmth of decomposing plants. A sea turtle may crawl ashore in the dark, burying her eggs beneath the sand before returning to the sea. Frogs deposit their eggs in narrow cracks behind waterfalls, where spray keeps them moist and out of reach. These are quiet defenses. No walls, no armor, just placement. Others rely on numbers. A single egg may be fragile, but 100 eggs overwhelm. If only a few survive, the lineage continues. This is common among fish, amphibians, insects. A butterfly may lay dozens of eggs across a host plant. A salmon releases thousands into the current. There is no illusion of safety, just a calculation. Enough will be enough. Some species go further, using timing as a shield. They lay eggs at night, when predators are less active. They synchronize laying with the tides, with the moon, with the rains. In doing so, they reduce the odds that any one clutch will be found. This isn't protection in the physical sense. It's probability. Time as camouflage. Camouflage itself plays a large role. The shells of many bird eggs match the color of the soil or nesting material around them. Speckled patterns break up outlines. Pale shades blend into dry grass or bark. Some eggs are nearly invisible unless the light shifts just so. Others reflect a soft blue or green, not bright, but enough to mimic the dappled light of leaves overhead. This blending is especially important for ground nesting birds. Their eggs lie exposed to the sky. Predators include foxes, snakes, raccoons, and even other birds. A single glimpse can end a future. So evolution has painted the shells with quiet purpose, not to stand out, but to disappear. But not all defenses are visual. Some insects lay eggs that taste bitter or toxic. The chemicals aren't meant to harm the embryo. They're there to deter. A predator that samples one will avoid the rest. This strategy only works if the eggs survive long enough to be remembered. But in nature, one lesson is often enough. Some species coat their eggs in secretions that harden in air, forming a shell or capsule too tough for most jaws. Others surround them in foam or slime, difficult to grasp. Some insects inject their eggs into hidden spaces, inside seeds, under tree bark, even into the bodies of other insects. There, the egg grows unseen, shielded not by shell, but by obscurity. Even the location of the nest can be a form of protection. Some birds nest in cliffs, others in trees filled with thorns. Some lay eggs on narrow branches that sway too much for heavier predators to reach. The nest becomes a fortress, not of walls, but of limits. And sometimes the parents stay. Crocodiles guard their buried nests with care. They hover nearby, motionless, until the hatchlings call out from beneath the sand. Birds take turns on the nest, watching the horizon. Poisoned dart frogs carry eggs on their backs, depositing them one by one in tiny pools. Octopuses coil around their eggs for weeks, gently fanning them with water, not feeding until the job is done. These actions do not guarantee survival, but they improve the odds. Because an egg is a meal, as well as a life, rich in protein, fat, and water. Easy to carry, easy to break. For a predator, it is food that doesn't run. For the creature that laid it, it is hope, made real. You can picture them now, a clutch of eggs buried beneath leaves, warm and unseen. A narrow blue egg, balanced on a ledge. A string of insect eggs glinting on a stem. Some will vanish, some will stay. But for a time, they are held by placement, by pattern, by number, by memory. Each egg a quiet risk and a quiet defense. Long before eggs were farmed, counted, or cooked in kitchens, they were found. Resting in nests, hidden in sand, balanced on ledges, carried by rivers, left behind in the quiet hours of dawn. For early humans, eggs were not domestic. They were wild, seasonal, delicate, and quietly valuable. Before the first fire, before the first field, humans were gatherers. They walked, watched, waited. They noticed patterns. When certain birds returned, when reptiles nested, when new life would begin if left untouched. They learned not just where to look, but when. Eggs offered a kind of gift. Dense, portable nourishment. Easy to carry. No tools needed, no fire required. In the right moment, they could be eaten raw, rich with fat and protein, sealed by nature. One shell held what was often scarce in the open world: concentration, energy ready to use. There are no written records from these early gatherers, but traces remain. At archaeological sites across Africa, Asia, and Europe, shell fragments have been found, scattered in caves, mixed with ash, pressed into soil. Ostrich shells in particular appear again and again, sometimes broken, sometimes burned, sometimes whole, with their tops carefully removed, forming small bowls or flasks. These fragments suggest more than hunger. They suggest use. An ostrich egg holds over a liter of liquid. Its shell is strong, nearly as thick as a ceramic bowl. Early humans may have used them to carry water across dry regions. Some shells were etched with patterns, crosshatches, dots, gentle lines. Not writing, but perhaps memory. Marks made with intention. In parts of southern Africa, broken ostrich shells were strung together as beads. Small pieces shaped by hand, drilled and smoothed, then worn or carried. These ornaments are tens of thousands of years old. They speak not just of survival, but of meaning. Of the egg not only as food, but as form, useful, beautiful, familiar. Bird eggs were gathered too, though they left fewer marks. Their shells are thinner, more fragile. A dropped egg disappears into soil, leaving little behind. But bone tools found near nesting sites suggest that people returned, season after season, to collect. In coastal regions, gull and tern eggs were likely taken. In forests, duck and pheasant. In open plains, quail and partridge. These patterns were tied to migration, to weather, to time of year. In this way, eggs help shape early calendars. Reptile eggs may have been used as well. Crocodile eggs, buried in sandbanks, were easy to find during certain seasons. Turtle eggs, laid on beaches in large numbers, were another opportunity. These eggs were often softer, easier to break. The taste and texture varied, but they offered the same essential qualities: fat, protein, and timing. The act of gathering eggs also required care. A misstep could crack a clutch. A loud approach could scare a parent away. A waiting predator might be nearby. To collect an egg was to enter a moment of quiet calculation, of how many to take, how often, and how long to wait before returning. Over time, these choices became habits. Habits became patterns, and patterns shaped migration. Some groups may have followed birds or reptiles seasonally, returning to the same nesting grounds year after year. Eggs didn't last long on their own. They spoiled or were eaten quickly, but the memory of them endured. Their presence marked a place and time. Eventually, fire changed how eggs were used. Roasted in ashes, boiled in heated stones, stirred into early doughs or wrapped in leaves. Cooking made eggs safer, more digestible, and perhaps more varied. But even without flame, the egg had long been a companion. You can picture it now: a sunlit slope, warm in spring, a figure crouched beside a nest, fingers brushing aside leaves, lifting one pale shell at a time. Not hurried, not careless, just attentive, grateful. Before agriculture, before domestication, before recipes, there was the egg, carried in memory, gathered by hand, marking the rhythm of seasons, the presence of birds, the shape of life as it returned, again and again. The egg was once a surprise, a seasonal gift. Found, not made. But slowly, steadily, humans changed that. Not all at once, not with intention at first, but through quiet repetition of walking the same paths, gathering from the same nests, watching the same birds return again and again. Some animals seemed to linger. They stayed near fields and homes. They scratched at the earth, fed on scraps, circled back even when left alone. These were the first steps toward domestication, not control, but cohabitation. a slow recognition shared between species. Among these animals was the red jungle fowl, a wild bird native to parts of Southeast Asia. Small, alert, with bright plumage and a voice that carried. It foraged in forests and clearings, feeding on seeds, insects, and fallen fruit. Its eggs were small, speckled, and well hidden, but they were familiar to those who lived nearby. Around 8,000 years ago, something began to shift. Jungle fowl that stayed close were fed. Their eggs were gathered. Their young were raised. Those that tolerated human presence were favored, perhaps without even realizing it. Over generations, this quiet selection changed them. They grew calmer. Their bodies changed shape. Their laying patterns shifted. They became chickens. Not all chickens were the same. Different regions developed different traits. Some laid more eggs, others grew faster. Some tolerated heat, others cold. Through this diversity, humans began to guide the process more intentionally, selecting birds not just for survival, but for usefulness. Egg laying became one of the primary traits. The wild jungle fowl laid just a few clutches of eggs per year, maybe a dozen eggs in total. But domesticated hens over time began laying more. First dozens per year, then hundreds. Today, some breeds lay nearly an egg a day during peak season. This change was not natural. It was shaped by generations of quiet decisions: which birds to keep, which to pair, which eggs to hatch. Chickens were not alone. Ducks, geese, and quail were also brought into human care. Ducks were domesticated in parts of Asia, especially in China. They were adaptable, comfortable in wet or dry environments, calm in groups, productive both for meat and eggs. Geese followed similar paths in Europe and Asia. They were larger, louder, and seasonal in their laying, but their eggs were valued for size and richness. Quail were smaller, delicate, patterned, quick to mature. Their eggs were speckled, easy to preserve, often used in trade. In some cultures, they were kept in small enclosures, raised for both their eggs and their song. Each animal brought something different, but they all shared a new pattern. They no longer laid eggs far from human view. Their nesting cycles became part of the household rhythm. Their care was tied to feeding, weather, and shelter. Domestication changed not just the animals, but the eggs themselves. Shell thickness, color, size, frequency. Wild eggs varied greatly, but domestic eggs became more predictable. In chickens, for example, selective breeding led to shell colors ranging from white to cream to brown, depending on the breed. The interior stayed the same, yolk and white, but the quantity increased. This reliability made eggs more than seasonal. They became steady, year-round in some climates. With artificial lighting and housing, even the rhythm of the sun could be adjusted. The egg became a daily presence, not a seasonal event. Artificial incubation followed. At first, people used warm sand, ashes, or brooding animals. Later, controlled heat and humidity allowed eggs to hatch without the parent nearby. This freed animals to continue laying. It also increased the number of chicks that could be raised at once. The egg became part of the infrastructure of settlement. It required feed, enclosures, care. But in return, it offered continuity, protein, fat, versatility, and above all, familiarity. You can imagine it now. A quiet courtyard, morning light catching the edge of a thatched roof. A woven basket lined with straw. Inside, 4 pale eggs. Still warm, gathered not from the wild, but from birds who know where to return. No longer found by accident, now brought by design. But still the same shape, still the same purpose, still the same unfolding life, whether eaten, hatched, or held in hand. Domesticated, but never diminished. When people began to keep birds close, they began to cook with their eggs. Not just to survive, but to shape, to flavor, to create something warm, familiar, and nourishing. The egg, once found and gathered, now became part of the rhythm of meals, simple and soft, or folded into something more. Eggs appear in nearly every cuisine on earth, in every region, with every ingredient, cooked in ways both ancient and new. Not because they are exotic, but because they are constant. They take on the shape of the dish around them. They hold, they lift, they bind, they soften. In Japan, eggs are wrapped into tamagoyaki, a rolled omelette, sweet and savory, sliced into neat rectangles and served beside rice. In North Africa and the Middle East, they rest in the center of shakshuka, a dish of tomatoes, peppers, and spices, the yolks gently cooked but still bright. In France, eggs swirl into hollandaise and soufflés. In Italy, they enrich pasta dough. In India, they simmer in curry. And everywhere, they begin the day. Boiled, fried, poached, scrambled, stirred into congee, laid beside flatbread, spread across toast, in warm kitchens and cold ones, over fire, in pans, in pots of water gently bubbling. The morning egg is not always the same, but the feeling is. Something full, ready, close to the start of things. Preservation came next, because eggs, though plentiful, don't last forever. And people found ways to keep them, not just for days, but for weeks, even months. Some were salted, brined slowly until the yolk grew dense and rich. Others were pickled, soaked in vinegar and spices. In parts of Asia, eggs were coated in clay, ash, and lime, left to cure until they turned dark and translucent. These are called century eggs, not truly 100 years old, but deeply aged, their flavors strong and earthy. In Scandinavia, eggs were stored in cold cellars. In parts of Africa, buried in ash. In China, tea eggs were simmered with leaves and spices, their shells cracked to let flavor creep in. In the Philippines, balu, a fertilized, partially developed egg, is boiled and eaten warm, a dish of texture and timing. Each preparation reflects place, what was available, what was needed, what the season allowed, and still eggs remained adaptable. In baking, they became structure. Egg whites trap air when whipped, forming soft peaks that hold cakes and pastries upright. Yolks add richness and color. Together, they create the golden sheen of bread crust, the tenderness of sponge, the lift of meringue. In sauces, they thicken and bind, from mayonnaise to custards. In pasta, they turn flour into silk. In rice, they coat each grain with warmth. In broth, they swirl into threads. There is no single egg dish, just the presence of egg inside many. And then, beyond the plate, came meaning. In many cultures, the egg became a symbol, of fertility, of rebirth, of cycles returned. It appears in spring festivals, dyed and decorated. It marks transitions, from fast to feast, from dark to light, from one season to the next. Painted eggs, gifted eggs, hidden eggs. Not just food, but message. In Christianity, the egg appears at Easter, often dyed red, sometimes gold, cracked gently in games. In Zoroastrian traditions, eggs were part of Nowruz, the new year. In ancient Persia, they marked balance, the return of day and night to equal length. Even without symbolism, the egg holds a kind of stillness, a form of pause before the beginning. That's why it fits breakfast so well, the start of a day, or why it often ends a dish, poached over grains, sliced atop soup, stirred into something already warm. You can imagine them now, spread across the world. A boiled egg sliced beside herbs, a fried egg crisp at the edges, yolk soft, a rice bowl brightened with tamago, a pastry glossed with egg wash rising, a cup of custard cooling. Each one different in shape and taste, but rooted in the same shell, the same quiet beginning. Not extravagant, not rare, just present, adapted to hands and hunger, made familiar by time and care. An egg is not only built to support life, it is made of life's essentials. What it provides to a developing embryo, water, energy, structure, time, it also offers to those who eat it. Not in excess, not in extremes, just in quiet balance. Inside the shell, nothing is wasted. The yolk, the white, the membranes, each part contains what a new body needs to form. And so, for those who eat eggs, that same structure provides nourishment, a simple food, a full one, carefully arranged by nature, with no need for invention. The egg's most well-known gift is protein. It appears in both yolk and white, though most of it is found in the white, also called the albumin. One large egg contains about 6 grams of protein in total, nearly evenly split. These proteins include ovalbumin, ovotransferrin, and lysozyme, each with specific functions in the raw egg, and each useful when eaten. The value of this protein is not just in amount, but in completeness. Eggs contain all 9 essential amino acids, the building blocks the body cannot make on its own. They are present in the right proportions to support growth, repair, and everyday function. For this reason, egg protein is often used as a reference point. It is considered high quality, not because it is superior, but because it is complete. Alongside protein, the egg offers fat, nearly all of it in the yolk. About 5 grams in a typical egg, mostly unsaturated. The yolk also carries essential fatty acids, including omega-3s, depending on the hen's diet. These fats are important, not just for energy, but for cell structure, hormone production, and brain health. In the developing embryo, they support the building of tissues. In the adult body, they help maintain them. The yolk contains cholesterol, about 185 milligrams per egg. For years, this number was viewed with caution. But the understanding has shifted. Dietary cholesterol does not affect blood cholesterol in the same way for everyone, and the body adjusts its own production in response to intake. For most people, eggs can be eaten in moderation without concern. The cholesterol in an egg is part of its design. a tool for building new cells, not a warning. Eggs also carry a quiet abundance of vitamins. Vitamin A for vision and immune function. Vitamin D for bone strength and calcium absorption. Vitamin E, an antioxidant. Vitamin K for blood clotting. And several B vitamins, including B12, needed for nerves and red blood cells, and riboflavin, which supports energy metabolism. These vitamins are mostly found in the yolk. The white contributes as well, especially to hydration and protein, but the yolk is where the concentrated nutrients rest. Minerals are present too. Iron, needed for oxygen transport. Selenium, an antioxidant. Zinc, for healing and immune health. Phosphorus, which supports bones and teeth. Iodine, important for thyroid function. Each one small in amount, but placed with care. Folate, also known as vitamin B9, is present in the yolk. It helps form DNA and supports growth, especially during early development. This is one reason eggs are often part of diets during pregnancy. They offer gentle density, not large in size, but full in effect. Another strength of the egg is satiety. When eaten, especially whole, eggs tend to satisfy hunger. This is due to the balance of protein and fat, a combination that digests slowly, offering a steady release of energy. This is why eggs are often found in breakfast and early meals. They start the day with something lasting. What the egg offers is not perfection, but completeness. Not a cure, not a promise, but a food that holds what a body often needs, especially during growth, recovery, or times of simplicity. It is not enhanced. It is not optimized. It is just as it is. A closed system that opens when needed. You can imagine it now. The soft center of a cooked yolk. The gentle stretch of egg white on a spoon. A plate with nothing added. A quiet meal. Enough. Not designed by humans, just used well by them. And in that use, repeated across cultures, seasons, and generations, the egg remains not just a nutrient, but a companion. Always whole, always small, always complete. The yolk of an egg holds many things: fats, vitamins, energy, and cholesterol. For years, this last part drew attention, not because it was new, but because it raised questions. How could something so small carry so much of something so talked about? And what did it mean for the people who ate it? One large egg contains around 185 milligrams of cholesterol, almost entirely in the yolk. Cholesterol is not a fat, though it often travels with fat. It is a waxy substance built by animals, used to make hormones, support cells, and help form vitamin D. The body produces its own cholesterol, in the liver mostly, adjusting its levels based on diet, need, and genetics. For a time, it was assumed that eating foods high in cholesterol would raise the cholesterol in the blood. This idea made sense on the surface. Intake equals increase. But over time, the science evolved. Studies began to show that the body's response to dietary cholesterol was more complex. In many people, the cholesterol from food had a limited effect on blood cholesterol levels. The body adjusted its own production, lowering it slightly to balance what came in. This doesn't mean dietary cholesterol has no effect, but it means that eggs, once limited by some guidelines to just a few per week, are now seen in a softer light. Most modern health organizations agree. For most people, eating eggs in moderation is safe. It does not increase the risk of heart disease in healthy individuals. Some guidelines suggest an egg a day is fine. Others are even more flexible, focusing less on specific numbers and more on overall diet. This shift reflects a broader change in nutrition science, a move away from individual nutrients in isolation and toward patterns. It's not one egg, one day. It's the whole picture. What else is on the plate? What the day looks like? What the week holds? How the body responds over time? Still, individual differences remain. Some people are more sensitive to dietary cholesterol. These individuals, often referred to as hyperresponders, may see a more noticeable increase in blood cholesterol after eating cholesterol-rich foods. But even in these cases, the type of cholesterol matters. LDL, sometimes called bad cholesterol, can rise, but so can HDL, the good cholesterol that helps remove excess from the blood. The overall balance, rather than the total number, often tells the clearer story. Genetics play a role. So does metabolism. So do other aspects of diet. Fiber intake, saturated fat, lifestyle, exercise. Cholesterol doesn't act alone. In context, an egg is part of a broader system. Eaten with vegetables, whole grains, and healthy fats, it fits comfortably. Eaten with balance, it adds more than it takes. Eaten as part of a varied pattern, it becomes something familiar, not something feared. And it's helpful to remember, the cholesterol in an egg isn't there by accident. It's part of the egg's purpose. The embryo inside uses it to build cells, produce hormones, and begin its own systems. Without it, development could not continue. It's not a flaw, it's a feature. This view, quiet, complete, helps return the egg to its natural place. Not as a superfood, not as a danger, but as a food, long understood and gently used. You can picture it now, a soft-boiled egg in a small bowl, a bright yolk, resting in white, eaten slowly, no rush, no worry, just part of a meal, not the center, not the threat, just a familiar shape on the plate, steady and whole. The science continues to evolve, as all science does. But today, the view is calmer. Moderation, not elimination. Context, not panic. Pattern, not panic. For most people, the egg fits. It nourishes. It satisfies. It holds the same form it always has, curved, sealed, complete. And inside, the cholesterol is just one part. One note in a quiet composition of elements, assembled not by design, but by time. A small shell, still offering what it always did. Something to eat, something to understand, something to keep in balance. Once an egg is laid, time begins to move around it and through it. Though the shell appears sealed, it isn't closed. It breathes, it exchanges, it slowly shifts. What lies inside the shell is not frozen in place, but moving quietly toward what comes next. In a fertilized egg, that movement leads to life. In an unfertilized egg, or one collected before development begins, time shapes it differently. Not toward growth, but toward aging. Not decay, not immediately, but gentle change. Shifts that can be felt, measured, and sometimes seen. The shell itself allows this to happen. Thousands of microscopic pores dot its surface, invisible to the eye, but open just enough to allow gases and moisture to pass. Oxygen enters, carbon dioxide escapes. Water, too, is slowly released, especially in dry environments. As the egg loses water and gas, a small space inside begins to grow. This is the air cell, found at the blunt end of the egg, between the two inner membranes. It forms shortly after laying, when the warm contents begin to cool and contract. Over time, as more water leaves, the air cell expands. In fresh eggs, it's small, barely noticeable. In older eggs, it becomes larger, even visible when held against light. This simple fact gives rise to a common test, the float test. Place an egg in a bowl of water. A fresh egg will sink and lie flat. An older egg will tilt or stand upright. A very old egg may float entirely, lifted by the large air pocket inside. This doesn't always mean the egg is unsafe, but it tells a story of time. The contents of the egg shift too. The white, or albumin, becomes thinner as proteins break down and water redistributes. In a fresh egg, the white is firm and holds the yolk close to center. In an older egg, the white spreads more easily. The chelazae, the twisted cords that anchor the yolk, soften. The yolk itself flattens slightly, its membrane becoming more fragile. Smell is also a guide. A truly spoiled egg, once cracked, gives off a strong, unmistakable odor, a sign of bacterial activity or sulfur compounds. But most eggs change gradually with no sudden alarm. The shell protects, the membranes hold, the contents wait. Refrigeration slows these changes. In cooler temperatures, water loss and microbial growth are reduced. In many parts of the world, especially where eggs are washed before sale, refrigeration is standard. The washing process removes the outermost protective layer, a natural coating called the cuticle or bloom. Without it, the egg becomes more porous and vulnerable. Chilling it becomes important. In other regions, where eggs are sold unwashed, the bloom remains intact. This invisible barrier helps block bacteria and reduce moisture loss. In these places, eggs can often be stored at room temperature for days or weeks, especially if they are used soon after laying. The method depends on the system, and the system depends on the culture. People have also found ways to extend freshness by other means. Coating eggs in oil, storing them in cool cellars, turning them regularly to prevent the yolk from settling. Even ancient preservation methods, like storing in ash, clay, or salt, work by slowing the same processes: moisture loss, gas exchange, and microbial entry. Modern tools make it easier to measure freshness. Candling, holding an egg to bright light, reveals the size of the air cell, the clarity of the white, the position of the yolk. Grading systems used in commercial production classify eggs based on interior and exterior quality. But even without tools, the hands and eyes of home cooks have long been enough. You can picture it now, a carton of eggs resting on a shelf, cool to the touch, smooth in the hand, each one with a slightly different past. One laid yesterday, another a week ago, another perhaps 2. They look the same. But inside, time has left small signatures. The egg does not resist these changes. It moves with them, quietly, predictably, from fresh to older, from still to slightly hollowed, from thick to thin, always holding until it no longer can. Not spoiled, just different, not broken, just changed. And in that change is a softness, a reminder that even still things move, even sealed things shift, even quiet things grow older in ways we can see, touch, and understand. One breath at a time, one egg at a time. The egg is older than agriculture, older than tools, older than cities, names, or clocks. But today, it moves through systems shaped by all of those things. Quiet ovals resting in long lines, carried by belts and bins, sorted by machines. What once was gathered one by one from nests in trees or sand is now collected by the thousands, by the millions every day. In many countries, egg production is one of the most finely tuned systems in modern food supply. On commercial farms, hens are bred and raised not just for survival, but for consistency. To lay eggs predictably, efficiently throughout the year. A typical modern laying hen produces around 300 eggs annually. This is not an accident. It is the result of selective breeding, careful feeding, controlled lighting, and environmental management. Each hen cycle is influenced by cues, the hours of light per day, the temperature, the nutrients in her feed. In the wild, these rhythms might vary with season. In controlled systems, they are made steady. Eggs are laid, collected, and moved, often without hands. Conveyor belts carry them from the nest to central stations. There, they are washed, dried, and sanitized. In some places, they are lightly coated in oil to replace the natural protective layer lost during washing. They are then graded by weight, by shell quality, by interior appearance if candled. Labels follow: large, extra large, jumbo, grade A, grade AA. From there, they are packed into cartons, 6, 12, 18 at a time, and chilled for storage. Trucks carry them to warehouses, then to grocery shelves. In this system, an egg laid in the early hours of the morning may be refrigerated, boxed, and in transit before sunset. Some systems are vast. Thousands of hens housed in climate-controlled barns with automated feeders and air filters. Others are smaller, family farms, pasture-based operations, where eggs are still collected by hand, one by one, from straw-lined boxes. Both systems coexist. Both bring eggs to markets and tables. The difference lies in scale, rhythm, and method. In many places, infrastructure makes all of this possible. Electricity, transportation, refrigeration, inspection. Without these, large-scale egg production would slow. In regions without consistent cold storage, eggs may be sold unwashed, preserving their natural bloom, and used more quickly. The systems adapt to what's available, but modern egg systems raise questions too, about how animals are kept, how land is used, how resources are balanced. Animal welfare has become a growing concern. In many industrial operations, hens are housed in battery cages, small wire enclosures where space is limited. Some countries have banned or restricted these systems, encouraging cage-free, free-range, or pasture-based alternatives. Each label has specific definitions, some tied to space per bird, others to access to the outdoors. Consumers now navigate a variety of choices: organic, non-GMO, omega-3 enriched. Each label reflects a different aspect of the system: what the birds ate, how they lived, how the eggs were handled. These distinctions matter to some. To others, the egg remains simply an egg, familiar, useful, unchanged. There are also environmental questions. Egg production, like all agriculture, uses water, feed, space, and energy. Sustainability efforts focus on reducing waste, improving feed efficiency, and rethinking packaging and distribution. In this way, even the quiet egg is connected to broader systems: climate, economy, daily life. Yet amid these structures, the egg itself remains much the same. When cracked, it looks familiar. When cooked, it behaves as it always has, solidifying gently in heat, rising into foam when whipped, enriching dough, binding batter, offering structure. You can picture it now: a warehouse lined with cartons, the hum of cold air, the soft clack of trays on conveyor belts. Or a kitchen, early morning, a carton opened, a single egg lifted from the dozen. Both are part of the same line, the same curve of time, from hen to hand to heat. The systems are modern, the egg is not. It still holds what it always did: water, protein, fat, and potential. It still rests in a shell shaped by evolution. It still waits, still travels, still nourishes. Even when scaled into thousands, it keeps its shape. Even in the quiet machinery of modern life, it remains personal. And in every system, large or small, the egg continues to pass gently from one space to another, still curved, still whole, still complete. The egg has been many things: a vessel for life, a structure for growth, a gift from wild nests, a product of systems. But most often, it is simply there, not a centerpiece, not a spectacle, just present, resting in a carton, waiting in a bowl, warming in a pan. It is part of the quiet routines that shape human days. You reach for it without thinking. Open the fridge, crack the shell. Hear the small sound as the yolk falls into the bowl. A moment so familiar it barely registers. And yet, it marks the start of something. An egg begins meals, not always fancy ones, not always planned, but steady meals, scrambled with herbs, folded into rice, stirred into batter, fried with toast, the kind of food made when time is short or comfort is needed, the kind of food made with hands that have done it before. In homes around the world, eggs appear in kitchens, not because they demand attention, but because they offer something simple. They fill gaps, they finish dishes, they bring things together: flour, oil, heat, motion. They thicken and lift, they hold and smooth. They are in omelets and noodles, in cookies and pancakes, in sauces and soups, in pastries, custards, and crepes. They are brushed on crusts and folded into dough, boiled for lunchboxes, whisked into breakfast, always nearby. Their presence is both personal and shared. A child watches a parent crack an egg into a skillet. The sound becomes familiar. The motion becomes a memory. Years later, that same sound returns in a different kitchen, a different pan. It connects time. It connects people. For some, cracking an egg is the first cooking task they learn. For others, it is the first task they return to after illness, after loss, after change. It does not require much, just a bowl, a fork, a little heat. But what it makes can be enough. Even the feel of it is familiar, the coolness of the shell, the slight resistance when pressed, the way the contents slip into a pan, the way the white changes in heat, the way the yolk holds, then breaks. In this way, the egg is not just food. It is an object of daily life. In restaurants, it appears on plates again and again. A poached egg on greens, a soft-boiled egg in broth, a baked egg resting in pastry. But its roots are still in home kitchens, small spaces, morning light, family routines. It becomes part of language. Walking on eggshells, a good egg, egging someone on. The shell, the shape, the familiarity, all turned into metaphor passed down through speech. And through all of it, the egg remains quietly unchanged. It does not ask for notice. It does not trend. It does not fade. It simply continues through decades, across cultures, inside memories. You can picture it now. A quiet morning, a stove warming, a bowl on the counter. Someone stands, still sleepy, tapping an egg gently on the edge of the sink. The sound is soft. The motion is slow. The moment is not unusual, but it is whole. These are the parts of life that go unrecorded, not because they're unimportant, but because they're constant. The egg holds space in those moments, not as a marvel, not as a mystery, just as something known, something close. Its shell changes with time. Its uses vary, but its role as a companion to daily life stays. It sits in markets, in baskets, in coolers, in cartons. It waits in hotel breakfasts and corner cafes, in lunchboxes and picnic baskets, in single rooms and family kitchens. It is there when time is limited. It is there when comfort is needed. It is there when the recipe begins. And in that quiet repetition, it becomes more than an ingredient. It becomes part of the rhythm, a shape that fits into human hands, a sound that signals warmth, a food that holds, in every sense, enough. We've seen the egg from many angles, as food, as shelter, as shape, as chemistry. Cracked, cooked, collected, studied, held in hand, hidden in nests, lifted from conveyor belts. But even now, after all the layers, the egg is still more than the sum of its parts. It is not a product, not just a form. It is an idea, repeated, refined, carried through time, a complete biological solution. When animals first moved from water to land, they needed a way to bring moisture with them, to protect life outside of liquid. The cleidoic egg was the answer. Self-contained, layered, sealed, but breathable. It allowed embryos to grow without drying out. It made the land livable step by step. The egg changed evolution. It changed survival. Its design is elegant, but not extravagant. A membrane to hold fluid, a yolk to feed, a white to cushion, a shell to shield, tiny pores to let in air, Every piece has a purpose, every layer a role, and none of it wasted. Whether laid in water, buried in sand, or warmed beneath feathers, the egg works. It doesn't need to move. It doesn't need to flee. It simply protects what is forming inside, patiently, steadily, until the time is right to open. And what's inside is more than just matter. It's motion. Cells dividing, organs forming, bones stretching, a heartbeat beginning, a life unfolding quietly from one cell to many. The yolk disappears, the membranes thin. The chick or hatchling begins to breathe, then begins to break free. From single cell to feathered wing, the egg contains everything, all inside a shell that fits in a palm. Even in animals that no longer lay eggs, mammals, including humans, the pattern is still there. A fertilized cell, a membrane, a fluid-filled chamber, a growing form, supported from within. The egg reimagined, internal instead of external, but still essentially the same. Reproduction, protection, growth, release. The egg holds all of it. And in kitchens, we hold the egg without always thinking of that. We crack it open, we stir, we fry, we fold it into dough, we carry it home in cardboard cartons, we leave it in bowls on counters, we reach for it in morning light. It is familiar, so familiar that it's easy to forget what it really is. Not just nutrition, not just convenience, but an ancient tool, shaped not by industry, but by time. Long before chickens, there were reptiles. Long before reptiles, there were fish. Long before fish, there were single cells suspended in water, dividing. Every egg, even now, carries that history. It is not a recent invention. It is one of life's oldest patterns. It repeats across species, across continents, across ecosystems, sometimes large, sometimes many, sometimes one, sometimes soft, sometimes hard, but always the same purpose, to begin. And because it begins quietly, we often don't notice. But when we pause to look, to listen, to understand, the egg reveals itself as something steady, something complete. You can imagine one now, resting in stillness, uncracked, unmoved, a soft curve, a smooth surface, light falling across it. Not dramatic, not loud, just whole. Inside, the chemistry waits. The instructions rest, the form holds, and in the right conditions, with warmth, with time, life begins. That's the wonder of it. Not the surprise, but the steadiness, the reliability of emergence, the way something invisible becomes visible. Slowly, gently. Even when we don't see it, the egg continues. In nests, in labs, in barns, in oceans, in kitchens, a system, a shape, a solution, always curved, always quiet, always present.